What is your downright scariest real-life story? Story 1. I always parked in a certain spot at my last job for 12 years that I was there. It was accessible to the public as it wasn't company parking, but they wanted us to park in the back of the lot so that the closer spots could be available for customers. One day, my spot is taken by a dark-tinted caddy, and I'm immediately pissed because everyone knows that it's mine. It's morning shift, so 4 a.m., so it can't be one of the others because I know what they drive. So maybe a newbie? Or maybe another employee from another shop in the plaza. It's still there on my lunch break, and when I get home and the next day, I come in at 1 p.m. till close, around 9:30, and then also the next day. Something about it really bothered me. It smelled wrong, literally. It's the South and high summer, and who knows what's baking in there. My dad was a Marine and then a police officer, and he always said that if you could feel something is wrong, then there probably is something wrong. So I dialed the non-emergency contact police number, and I felt like an idiot, but every time I walked by, it bugged me. So I was stuck waiting for over an hour before anyone shows, and honestly, if I hadn't been off the next day, I would have been like, nah, F it. But I waited, mostly because I can really be a petty jerk, and that's my spot, damn it. The police show up, all annoyed because who knows how many "they can't park here" calls they get. They run the license plate through, and then things go crazy. They want all my info, want me to contact my manager, does this lot have cameras, have I touched the car, etc. Apparently, the car is on an Amber Alert as the last sighting of a missing person who was a minor, a 15-year-old girl. When they pop the trunk, they find her passed away under a blanket and the source of the smell. She had gone out with her much older, controlling, insecure boyfriend, but had decided to get out of the relationship. She only made the mistake of getting into the car with him. He drove 3 counties over after torturing her, stuffing her in there, and who knows what else, and then parked and walked away. Left her to pass in the trunk. I never learned her time of death, so it haunts me sometimes thinking that she might have been saved if I had made a fuss earlier. So yeah, listen to your gut, even if it seems petty. While that's a tragic and haunting story, it's a chilling reminder that sometimes our intuition can pick up on something that our logical mind can't explain. And it's always better to err on the side of caution. It's a shame that the outcome was so terrible, but it's important to remember that you did the right thing by reporting your suspicions to the police. Their actions may have helped bring some closure to a grieving family, and that's something to be proud of, I guess. Story 2. I was home alone when I was 11, and I had just fallen asleep, and someone tried to break in the front door. I called 911 and hid in the pantry in the bottom shelf. They came to the door next to the pantry and tried to break into that door too. The police got there and one of them picked me up and held me until my mom got there. I wouldn't let go, and he made sure I felt safe. I'm 27 now and haven't stayed home alone much since. The day I signed a lease for my first apartment, I got a dog so I wouldn't be alone. It's pretty traumatizing when you're that young. Story 3. I used to sleepwalk when I was a child. Now, we lived in a rough neighborhood, Decatur, Georgia, and I would wake up outside in the middle of the night not knowing how I got there, and would have to walk home and walk in the darkened doorway I had left open for whoever might be lurking around. However, the time that scared me the most was when I was about 10 years old. I woke up and found myself with the bedroom curtains drawn back and staring out the window. As I came awake, I noticed a very large and completely hairless man, like no hair, eyebrows, etc., staring at me and slowly inching closer to the window and closer to my face. He was looking bewildered, like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. At that moment, I realized what was going on, and I started screaming uncontrollably, frozen in place and peeing down my leg. The man freaked out and screamed, did a tumbling move, and then ran off in a weird zigzag like he was trying to dodge bullets. My mom woke up and thought that I probably had a nightmare. The next morning, I found a screwdriver on the front porch and damage to the door jamb and door handle. I still just about pee my pants when I tell that story, and now it's usually from laughing. I will never forget the look on his face, though, when I started to come to life and screaming, or his high-pitched scream, or his duck and roll and dodging and bobbing all the way down the street. Story 4. Years ago, in one of my first jobs, a colleague told me a story. The night before, she had gone out for some drinks, and on the way home, she had got off the bus and was walking down her road to her house. A taxi pulled up alongside of her, and the driver told her to get in the car. She obviously said no. He then said to her, "Call whoever you want whilst you're in the car, but please just get in and I'll explain." So she got in. Turns out, walking towards her was a topless guy with no shoes on and a machete in his hand. The cab driver had already called the police and then saw my colleague, so had stopped to look after her. Well, that's one way to get a ride home after a night out, but in all seriousness, it's good to know that there's still some decent people out there who are willing to go out of their way to help others. And to think all this time I've been avoiding taxis because I didn't want to get ripped off by the fare, when really they could be a knight in shining armor. I will say, though, I think that the cab driver could at least have said something and explained what was going on. I mean, I think you can explain that in about 2 seconds so that someone feels a little bit more comfortable about getting in your car. Story 5. This is a very tame story compared to a lot of the stuff here, but when I was 12, I saw this huge man drop a dollar bill. He seemed not to notice, so I ran across the street to hand it back to him. He thanked me several times, and I could see that he wasn't right in the head. I was a pretty small girl, probably only 100 pounds at the time, and this guy easily had a foot on me. All of a sudden, he grabbed me by the top of my head and wouldn't let go. I am so lucky that my dad was nearby, and he pretty much just picked me up and led me away. Story 6. I was riding my motorcycle on the highway going through a major city. I was still pretty nervous about riding on busier highways since I was still pretty new on the motorcycle. I was in one of the middle lanes when about 250 feet in front of me, an 18-wheeler, a semi, kicked up a plywood panel that was in the road in my lane. It flipped around, making it look like it was going to run into me like a wall. Didn't have enough time to brake or move lanes since I was surrounded by other vehicles, and luckily another 18-wheeler passed by it, causing it to rotate perpendicular, making it barely graze my elbow as I passed by it. I don't think I moved a muscle for a quarter mile in shock that I actually survived that. Story 7. I was active duty in the Navy, served aboard a submarine. We were in port one day, most of the crew had left, and the guys on duty for the night, that's us, were given permission to bring our kids on board for dinner. Halfway through the meal, someone makes a 4MC announcement. Now 4MC is the emergency announcement intercom thing. Says that there's light smoke in the engine room, quickly followed by fire in the engine room. We train for this stuff religiously, so everyone is immediately in action. Commanding officer is still there, but topside. One of our senior enlisted guys apparently ran the kids up front to the hatch where he was, quite literally throwing them through the hatch as our CO caught them and set them on the deck topside. The rest of us ran towards the fire, and I saw no one grabbing a mask. Not one person. So I grabbed a big handful of breathing masks and followed through the hatch, where we're greeted what would appear to be a light smoke filling the entire engine room. But it didn't smell like smoke. It was sweet, and it tasted sweet. An oil pump had blown and filled the entire back half of the boat with atomized hydraulic fluid. A guy was moments from lighting a torch in the engine room as the casualty was called. Had it been called just a moment later, we had walked into an inferno. Had he, for some reason, had not called it and lit a torch, then after we had run in, we had been on fire before we could react. Turned out perfectly fine. Cleaned the oil that clung onto the surfaces and fixed the pump. But it was somewhat surreal, understanding that how close we were to a wildly different result. Well, it looks like the Navy knows how to turn up the heat, but in this case, they avoided turning it up by just a little too much. Kudos to this person for thinking on their feet and grabbing those masks, because I'm sure that the sweet taste of hydraulic fluid was a flavor that you won't forget anytime soon. Story 8. Hearing a weird groan while hanging out with friends in a sketchy part of Phoenix. We would hear someone groaning and occasionally say help in a soft and tired voice. We go towards the voice and find a guy laying on the ground in a blood-covered shirt, one hand holding up a knife in his gut. His eyes were weirdly focused on us, but was whimpering and writhing. He kept saying, "Help me, oh God, I'm going to die, please help me." We said that we would call an ambulance, and he really didn't like that idea. No, don't call 911, just help me, I'm gonna die. But we called anyway. He stood up in his blood-covered shirt, knife in hand, and said, "Crap," and ran away. Story 9. I was rushing to a lab class, had books in one hand, lunch in the other, and attempted to walk downstairs into the lab. Except the steps were old cement steps with metal lips, and the tip of my foot caught the lip. I went head first, never touching anything the entire way down until I landed on my neck against the wall at the bottom of the stairs. I felt my entire weight load into my neck, and every single vertebrae popped. I knew I was dead. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. Everyone rushed out to the lab to see what had happened, because apparently it was loud. I was 300 pounds. And then, all of a sudden, the breath rushed back into my lungs and I could breathe and move. So I got up. It felt miraculous. Ended up with occasional severe back pain that eventually went away after 18 months or so. Story 10. When I was 17, my mom's husband had this mental breakdown and plotted and attempted to take her own life. I was recovering from knee surgery at the time, but still ran from my room to see what was going on. My baby brother, who was 4 at the time, was in the room when he was choking and stomping on her, and I had taken him out of the room and told my other siblings to leave the house and to get someone to call the cops. I had to tackle him to get him off her and had to pin him up against the washer and dryer and yelled at her to leave. I tried to lock him in their room to leave the house and to look for my siblings, and he just pushed me and went into the kitchen to grab a knife. He was trying to hurt himself because in the small time frame I had called the cops. While on the phone, he looked me in the eyes and started to scream and locked himself in the bathroom once he figured out that he would be arrested if he was gone. What scared me the most was how calm he was when he said, "She's cheating on me, so if I can't have her, no one else will," as I was screaming at him. I have no idea how I got him off her because he was 6'3", 300-something pounds. I'm 21 now, and to this day, I get jumpy around knives and panic when I don't hear from my mom after she leaves the house. That sounds like an incredibly traumatic experience to go through at such a young age, too. It's a testament to their strength and quick thinking that they were able to protect their family and call for help. It's understandable that you still feel the impact of that event, but I really hope over time, with some support and resources, that person can heal and move forward. That is some pretty scary stuff for sure. Story 11. A year ago, I was hospitalized with an infection in my right lower leg. They drew a line a few inches below my knee and said that if the infection spreads past this line, I'll lose my leg below the knee. They pumped me full of antibiotics, and it seemed to work. I had to finish my antibiotics regimen at a nearby rehab hospital. The day before I was transferred, my roommate and I were eating breakfast. Now, he was an older gentleman, and when he slept, he made weird gurgling noises. He said to a passing nutritionist that his breakfast should have come with 2 coffees. I heard that gurgling noise at the foot of his bed behind the curtain that separated us. This was still during COVID. I was about to call a nurse when one ran in asking if he was okay. The guy was coding. And all of a sudden, our room had nurses and a doctor running in trying to save this guy. It was controlled chaos. Procedures and medicines being used, being called out. One nurse kept track of everything on a laptop. I couldn't go anywhere. I was in the bed closest to the window. They kept pushing me closer to the window so more people could come in and help him. They worked on him for over an hour. And they called the time of death shortly afterwards. The doctor asked for a moment of silence, and he saw me sitting up in my bed and came over and asked if I was all right. I said that I was, even though I had tears in my eyes. Other nurses kept asking if I needed anything. Now, these people took time out to see if I was okay after what I just witnessed, and I asked one of the nurses to open the window a bit. She smiled and understood what I meant. It was a sunny day and very peaceful outside the window. Even now, telling this story a year later, and it brings me to tears. I heard someone's final words on this earth. "Excuse me, miss, but my breakfast was supposed to come with 2 coffees." Story 12. A few years ago, when I still lived at home with my mom in Philly, someone tried breaking into our house. I looked through the window next to the door and saw 2 men wearing ski masks staring back at me. One with some type of pipe or tool, and the other with a gun pointed right at me. I bolted away from the door and got my dad's 10 gauge and stood in the bathroom door as I called 911. They ended up running away and were caught down the road by the police. They had multiple warrants, each for break-ins in Maryland and Delaware, and one of which left a father of 2 shot in the spine and paralyzed. I'm still very thankful to this day that I wasn't harmed during that. Well, that's terrifying. It's a good thing that you were quick to react, and you had a shotgun to defend yourself in your home. You truly showed those burglars that you picked the wrong house to mess with. It's great that they were caught. Hopefully they received the punishment they deserve for their crimes. Nice job and stay safe. Story 13. I went to therapy with my first husband. He went on and on about how I was a bad wife. When it was my turn, I just said that I would like him to stop hitting me or dragging me across the floor. He wasn't happy. The therapist asked me to attend the next session alone. The husband wanted to know what I told the therapist. I couldn't even remember what I said. When we got home, he took my keys, my pager, glasses, and then tried to lock me into the bedroom. He also had the landline cut. It took 2 tries, but I finally escaped with what I could fit in my car. This was 20 years ago. I still have nightmares. He constantly told me that if I left him, he would find me. So, I'm very glad that I'm out. I was 14 when we started dating, and he was in his mid-20s and a friend of my dad. Story 14. Being fully homeless for a period of time. A lot of people think homeless means hobo on the streets, but it can also mean that you're always couch surfing or staying with family. And this was usually my situation, with the occasional rented home or short-term lease that I would usually end up being unable to pay for, but then for about a week I was literally homeless, sleeping on the streets and having to find cover while it rained. I didn't even have much more than multiple coats, and mostly slept in tennis huts in my local public park. It was terrifying, and I wanted to die just to get out of it. There's a happy ending though, because I've been married and a homeowner for a while, and I'll never be in that position again. I'm glad to hear that things have improved for this person because it's important to remember that homelessness can happen to anyone. It's not a reflection of a person's worth or value. This story is a reminder that we need to work towards creating a more equitable society where everyone has access to basic needs like shelter or support. We've got to do our part to help out, right? If you're ever in this spot, don't be afraid to take advantage and use services that the community offers as well. Some of those are actually pretty useful and pretty good. In the comments, what is your crazy, scary experience that you would like to share?